fourth graders, it's Mrs. Belatash, and I want to say you guys did a great job on your food webs. I stopped by school and I looked at the posters and they were fantastic. Great job. Now, when we looked at the food webs and we saw the producers, those are plants, we saw that that's the basis of the entire food web. If there's no plants, nobody else can eat. The herbivores eat those plants, and then other animals eat the herbivores. But if the herbivores have no food, then the food web will collapse. Today, we're going to look at those producers. We're going to start looking at what are some of the limits that plants have. Is there a limit to how dry they can be? Is there a limit to how wet they can be? Is there a limit to the amount of salt that can be in the water? So we're going to conduct 2 experiments at the same time. Half of you are going to do an experiment to see how dry or wet an environment can be for a plant. So if it's too dry, will the plant die? If it's too wet, will the plant die? The second group will be looking at how much salt can a plant tolerate. Now, this is actually very important because as global warming and climate change is happening, sea levels are rising. And when sea level rises close to the coast, seawater, which is salty, starts to come underneath the water table and starts to contaminate fresh water and make it brackish, somewhat salty. So how will that affect plants? So let's get started on those 2 experiments. The first experiment is going to use this sheet, Plant Experiment Water Tolerance. You need 4 bowls. And now we're going to label those 4 bowls. One is going to have a label dry. One is going to have the label moist. One is going to have the label wet. And one is going to have the label very wet. And then, do you see I have peas, radish, corn, and barley. And on the others, I just put the letters. But you need to know where you're going to plant each one of those seeds so that we can watch them and see which plants grow in different types of environments. While the first group is setting up their bowls, the second group can start on their experiment. And yours is going to be all about salt tolerance. You also need 4 bowls. The first thing I want to do is label the bowls. I put a label of 0 on one bowl. That means it's not going to have any salt. And I put a P for peas, a B for barley, a C for corn, and an R for radish. And then I have 1 spoon of salt with the same labels, 2 spoons of salt, and 4 spoons of salt. After you have your bowls labeled, then you're going to put 1 cup of soil in each container. The soil that is dry, I've dried this soil out for you. It's very dry. We do not want to add any water. You're going to take 1 cup of dry soil and add it to the container. So I place the seeds where each one is labeled. So here it's labeled radish, and I have 3 radish seeds. That's corn. I have 3 corn seeds. Barley, 3 barley seeds, and 3 pea seeds. Now I'm going to add 1/4 to 1/2 cup of dry soil on top. Next, I'm going to do the moist container. Now the moist container is just the soil as it comes out of the plastic bag. So it's got a little bit of water in it, but it's not wet. So I'm going to put 1 scoop of soil and I'm going to add the seeds. Again, I add 3 seeds of each type and I put them near their label. Peas, barley, corn, and radish. Now I'm going to do the same thing with wet and very wet soil. Now, what's the difference between wet and very wet soil? Well, I'm going to take the moist soil, and on the experiment it says With the wet soil, I'm going to add 40 milliliters of water right there. So I'm going to add 40 milliliters of water to the wet soil. For the very wet soil, I'm going to add 80 milliliters of water. So now I have all of my seeds planted and they're in sealed containers. The reason I want it to be sealed is because I'm not going to add any more water or anything to this container. This is now a complete environment. And if there's water evaporation, it will stay inside the bag. And so I want to see what happens with these different environments and how the seeds and plants grow. Okay, let's turn our attention back to the saltwater experiment. We have 4 bowls. One bowl has a 0 on it, meaning that it will not have any salt water. And then there's a bowl with a 1, a 2, and a 4. And this bowl will have the saltiest water. You're going to add 1 scoop of moist soil to each of the 4 bowls. You're going to plant the seeds, the corn, the peas, the radish, and the barley. I have all my seeds, and now I'm going to cover them up. Now that I have the soil and the seeds, I'm going to add water. This container is going to have water without any salt. I'm going to add 50 milliliters of water. This container is going to be watered with salt water that had only 1 spoon of salt for each liter of water. I'm going to add 50 milliliters. This container is going to be watered with salt water that has 2 spoons of salt for every liter of water. I'm adding 50 milliliters. The last container will be watered with salt water that has 4 spoons of salt for every liter. I'm adding 50 milliliters. These containers we are not going to put into a plastic bag. You guys need to decide how often you're going to water them. Maybe once a week, twice a week. When you water one of them, you must water all of them, but with the appropriate water. If it says 4, you have to use the very salty water. If it says 0, you use water with no salt. Okay, so you guys got all of your planting done. Some plants are in plastic bags and we're not going to be adding any water to them. We're just going to be observing them. Some plants are not in plastic bags and they need to have water added. I'd like you to take a look at this page, Plant Observations A. I added 2 numbers on this page. So, number of days after planting. I want you to observe your plants after 5 days. Then I want you to wait 3 more days and observe them after 8 days. And finally, I want you to observe them after 13 days. And I want you to record what you notice on those days. All right, I'll see you next time, and we're going to keep talking about this experiment and the range of tolerance for water and salt.